picking up where we left off, should be around page 102 in the chapter The Ghoul in Pajamas. We had, I believe, just finished discussing Hermione's comment that what it takes to put yourself back together after fragmenting your soul, I should say, is remorse, okay? Probably on the next page, should be probably on the next page, they keep talking and they're wondering, Ron and Harry particularly, are wondering how to destroy Horcruxes. And Harry mentions basilisk fangs, but they don't have a, bunch of those lying around. And Hermione says it doesn't have to be a basilisk fang, okay? They continue talking, and Ron says, but even if we wreck the thing it lives in, why can't the bit of soul in it just go and live in something else? Okay? And so Hermione has to kind of explain to Ron, how do I want to put this? Spiritual physiology, something like that. She says because a Horcrux is the complete opposite of a human being. And Ron and Harry look thoroughly perplexed. They have no idea what she's talking about. So she says, look, if I picked up a sword right now, Ron, and ran you through with it, I wouldn't damage your soul at all. Ron, which would be a real comfort to me. Harry laughs. Hermione says, it should be. The point is, whatever happens to your body, your soul will survive untouched. Okay? Now, notice what the whole discussion hinges upon. Or notice the basic premise behind the entirety of this discussion. What's the basic premise? What's the basic assumption? It's not a proven fact. It's an assumption. That the soul exists. Okay? That's an assumption. That's not a fact. Their whole conversation is based upon that. We're going to see a scene later in the novel, hopefully we'll see it, and don't run out of time, where, I'll go ahead and say it, Snape and Dumbledore are going to be having a conversation. It's in a memory, okay? And they're going to be talking about the mind and ideas and stuff. And Snape's going to respond in a way to something Dumbledore says. And he's going to say, I thought we were talking about the mind. Why are you talking about the soul? Okay? In doing so, Snape is kind of raising this question. Is the mind, the intellect, the same thing as the soul? She never comes out and definitively answers that. Why? Because she can't. That's an article of belief. It's not a statement of scientific fact. Right? So, when Hermione says, if I were to run you through with a sword, your soul would be left intact. Ron laughs. Because what's Ron thinking? I would be dead. Okay? Ron's response is kind of indicative of, or suggestive of, possibly, Voldemort's belief system. I'm not saying Ron's a secret Death Eater or anything like that. I'm saying Ron's mentality is, yeah, but I don't want to die. Okay? Think of Nearly Headless Nick. Why is Nick a ghost? Why is the Bloody Baron a ghost? Why is, I think I can say it, Rowena Ravenclaw a ghost? Why are there ghosts at Hogwarts? They haven't moved on. Why? Like I asked it, I had a quiz question about that. And several people put, the reason Nick's a ghost in Sirius isn't because Nick didn't move on. You didn't get credit for it. That's part of the answer. The answer is, Nick was what that Sirius wasn't? Louder? He was too scared. He was afraid to die. Sirius wasn't. And how do we know Sirius wasn't? His smart-ass remark. Is that the best you can do? Bam! And he gets zapped. Okay? How do we know Dumbledore isn't afraid to die? First book. To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. It is our choices, Harry, second book. Far more than our abilities, etc., etc. Okay? Ron, at this point, seemingly, is kind of afraid to die. He's 16, 17. Okay? So, Hermione goes on. The fragment of soul inside it, the Horcrux, okay, depends on its container. Think of the fragment of soul in this bottle as being that liquid you see sloshing around. If I stab a sword through there, what happens to the liquid? It's destroyed. It poured out. It's no longer contained. Its enchanted body for survival. It can't exist without it. Notice the corollary. The soul can exist without its body. But only what? If the soul is whole and intact. Remember what Slughorn said in the memory. The soul is supposed to remain whole. Okay? While the magical container, she goes on, is still intact, the bit of soul inside it can flit in and out of someone if they get too close to the object. Where do we see that? Book 2. Louder? Chamber of Secrets. In the diary. Who gets too close to the diary? Ginny Weasley. In fact, how close does she get to the diary? What does she enable Tom Riddle's Horcrux in the diary to do? It not only goes outside of the diary, it takes kind of at the very least, a visual form. And if it takes a visual form, then that means it's taking some kind of physical form. And the more and more Ginny pours into it, what happens to that physical form? It gets more and more and more real. How do we know? What can it do? What can Nearly Headless Nick not do at his 500th death day party? Or what can he rephrase that? What can he not enjoy? Food, right? He can't taste it. Why? He doesn't have a physical body. Tom Riddle can do what? In Chamber of Secrets. He can hold a wand. How can something that is immaterial hold a wand? Because the wand would go through it. He's getting more and more real. If that had continued, the idea is 16-year-old Voldemort would have come back. So, she says, you're in trouble if you get too fond of or dependent upon the Horcrux. And that's a part, I think, where Hermione is incorrect. You don't have to be fond or dependent on the Horcrux. How do we know? What are we going to see when they go into the Ministry of Magic? What do they take away from the Ministry of Magic? The locket. Okay? Do they become dependent on the locket? Do they become too fond of the locket? No. But Harry and Ron both wear the locket underneath their shirts, next to their skin, and close to their hearts. And what does the locket do? It affects them, not because they're fond of it, not because they depend upon it, but because this is, like the beating heart of evil right next to them. When they take it off, those effects go away. Okay? So they go on. Next chapter. I'm going to try and get us to, don't know that we will, end of chapter 16. So we're going to move quickly. Will of Albus Dumbledore. Okay? Couple pages in. So somewhere around 113, 114, somewhere around there, Hermione gives Harry a watch, right? For his 17th birthday. Whose watch was it? She tells Harry it was her brother Fabian's. Fabian who? Fabian Pruitt. One of the original Order of the Phoenix. The watch is dented. She says he was kind of careless. Is there another reason why it could have been dented? Or let me put it this way. When did she get Fabian's watch? After he was killed by Death Eaters, and if I remember correctly, we were told in book 5, I think it took 5 Death Eaters. Is that when she got the watch back? Might the watch have been dented from the attack? In other words, might this be a relic, so to speak, like a religious relic of a fallen martyr? Yeah, it could be. Okay? So, Scrimgeour shows up. And he comes in with Dumbledore's will. Dumbledore leaves each of them something. He leaves Harry 2 things, he leaves Ron 1 thing, and Hermione 1 thing. What did he leave Hermione? Well, what does he leave Ron? The Deluminator. Where do we first see the Deluminator? Very first book. When we're first introduced to Albus Dumbledore, he pulls out what looks like a lighter, and, the lights go out on the street. It's a deluminator. It turns the light off, okay? With the words, in the hope that he will remember me when he uses it, okay? And notice Ron's middle name, by the way, Bilious. It comes from the word, or it's related to the word, bile, which in the Middle Ages, Rowling was a medieval lit major, medieval lit and classics, if I remember correctly. Bile was one of the humors of the body, this immaterial essence in the body that determined part of one's character. Bile is what makes one either angry, if it's red bile, or if it's black bile, it makes you depressed and melancholy. Okay? Angry. What are redheads known for? Whether fairly or not, short tempers, short fuses. Look at Ron. I mean, Malfoy says mudblood about Hermione, and Ron's over the top. Okay? So you get that little name symbolism. So, Ron gets the Deluminator. What does he give Hermione? Tales of Beetle the Bard. Why? In the hope that she will find it entertaining and instructive. The first century Roman poet, Horace, said that the purpose of literature was to teach and delight. Okay? Had to be both. If it was only teaching, it would be boring. Believe me, there's thousands of lines of poetry from the Middle Ages that are all about teaching. Nobody reads them other than to come up with a dissertation topic because nobody's written on it. Okay? And to delight. If it's only delightful, and doesn't have any teaching to it, Horace would say it's not fulfilling the purpose of literature. All right? So, that you'll find it entertaining and instructive. What's the problem with that in terms of its recipient? Keep going. It's children's, it's kiddie lit. Fairy tales. This is Hermione. Does Hermione have any time for fairy tales? No. In fact, we're going to see. When they start talking with Xenophilius Lovegood, she's going to be like, it's just a morality play. It's not real. It's not true. It's just kind of meant to tell children how they're supposed to behave. And he's like, no, not at all. Okay? What's he give Harry? Golden snitch he caught in his first Quidditch game. How did he catch that? Nearly swallowed it. Okay? What else? What sword? The sword of Godric Gryffindor, which Scrivener says historically has appeared at times to certain people who were a worthy Gryffindor. Remember what Dumbledore told Harry at the end of book 2? Only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that sword out of that hat. Right? The sword is what Dumbledore is referring to when he tells Harry that there's only one relic of Godric Gryffindor still around. But there's not. There's 2 because of the hat. Okay? And what did he mean? Only a true Gryffindor. Is that only somebody who really belongs in Gryffindor house? Because the hat wanted to put him in Slytherin. Harry chose Gryffindor. Or does it mean something else? Does it mean a lineal descendant of Godric Gryffindor? Okay? So, he gives Harry the snitch, but he doesn't give Harry the sword. And they argue back and forth. Scrivener burns Harry in the chest. Ron pulls out his wand. Scrivener says, time you learned some respect. Harry responds, time you earned it. And then he says, I don't like your methods, minister. Who does he mean by your? Does he mean Rufus Scrivener personally? Might. But who did the scar on his hand? Well, literally Harry did that because he wrote the lines. But that was Umbridge, right? In her position as emissary, spy, for the Ministry of Magic. And now that he's the spokesperson, so to speak, the face of the Ministry of Magic, it applies to him. So they talk about what they've received. They don't know what, I open at the close means. And we get chapter 8, the wedding. Okay? And we see a variety of people at the wedding. We get introduced to Xenophilius Lovegood, who has this symbol on his robe. Looks like that. Okay? And look at his name. Where do we see this word in modern English usage? Or this part of the word? Louder? Xenophobia, or xenophobic. What's it mean? What's the phobic? Fear of. It's wildly misused. Okay? Xeno. Foreign, strange, alien. You go back to the original Greek, and the best term for it is other. Phileus. If she had spelled this way, then it would mean son of. This is Latin. But she spells it this way. This is Greek. And it means love of. Love of the other. Think of Xenophilius and think of his daughter Luna and the Snorcrack uncle, whatever. I mean, they're totally in love with strange, odd, weird things. They're kind of like fully magical versions of Hagrid, right? So they don't go into the monsters. Love of the other. There's a lot of meaning in that. Or love of the strange, or love of the foreign, or love of the alien, right? Harry meets up with Auntie Muriel. He meets up with Doge. But before them, let's see, what did I say? It's page 22 pages. Somewhere around 143, 144 maybe, we hear part of the wedding ceremony. We are gathered together to celebrate the union of two faithful souls. Okay? So, the officiant, and we're not told who this person is. We're not told that this is a magical priest of some sort. It's just some guy in black, okay? Same guy who presided at Dumbledore's funeral. Union, joining together of two faithful souls. Notice, the wedding is not about bodies coming together. Okay? And we hear a bunch of talk in between. Do you, William Arthur, Weasley, take Fleur Isabel, and there's more description. They finish. Then I declare you bonded for life. Isn't this the second? Unbreakable vow, therefore? Notice, bonded for life. What does that kind of imply? You break the bond, and you die. I mean, that's implied. I'm not saying that that's literally the case. Okay, so let's go back and review some history, just very, very briefly. Tom and Maripay Riddle. How were they married? Muggle marriage? Magical marriage. Tom had been under a potion. You think she's taking them to the local vicar? Kind of doubt it. Okay, but there's one. Snape's parents, Eileen Prince, and do we ever hear his name? Okay, it's implied they split up. Hagrid's parents, father's a wizard, mom's a, almost said dragon, giant, okay? They split up. We hear about Dumbledore's mother. We don't hear a word about his father. Kind of interesting. I almost said play. The novels are riddled with these broken, dysfunctional families. Why? Is Rowling trying to write something that maybe children from broken, dysfunctional families? Can I do it? Yeah, I think she is partly. That's why, there's an emphasis on death, because people do die, and she's trying to help children, when they start reading these, identify with and understand and deal with death. Why? Because she had to deal with that at the age of 22, when her mom died when her mom was 45 because of breast cancer. Okay? So, why else is this chapter important? Well, we see Victor Crumb, and what does he explain about this? Notice, his explanation is wrong, but it is an explanation. What does he call that? Grindelwald's mark, or Grindelwald's mark. What is it meant to be akin to in our world from his perspective? Yeah, I just saw your head go, oh. It's like a Nazi swastika. Notice, however, this predates Grindelwald. This gentler, by a good 4,000 years. This is a very, very, very old symbol. It represents the sun. These are rays of light going off. Okay? But I don't recommend, going around and painting rays of light, on various places, because you'll probably get in trouble. So, Harry, in disguise, listens to Crumb and such, and then he goes off and he speaks with Doge. Page 149, 150, 151. And Harry mentions what Rita Skeeter said. Doge, don't believe a word of it. Not a word, Harry. Notice, don't believe. What does that imply? He can choose. Let nothing tarnish your memories of Albus Dumbledore. Harry looked into Doge's earnest, pained face and felt not reassured, but frustrated. Why did Doge, however you want to pronounce his name, really think it was that easy, that Harry could simply choose not to believe? Notice Harry puts it to choose not to believe. Not to believe what? Rita Skeeter's lies. Rather than choosing what to believe. His memories of Dumbledore. See, there's a big difference when you cast something in a negative light. Why? Because it forces you to look at it negatively. If you walk into the first day of any class and you think to yourself, maybe because of prior history with that subject, this is going to suck. What does that do? That kind of tends to color the experience. And it might color it, whereas if you walk in, this is new, might be interesting, open mind. Like we find out Xenophilius Lovegood will say about Hermione, you are closed-minded. And then she does something and goes, oh, now you're starting to open your mind a little. Did Doge really think it was that easy? Harry could simply choose not to believe. Didn't Doge understand Harry's need to be sure? Notice what's being said. It's belief versus knowledge. Or, another way of putting it, faith versus fact. Harry wants facts. Okay? So Doge and Harry go on and talk. And then Auntie Muriel comes in. Who is Auntie Muriel, the Wizarding World's equal of? Another Auntie M, Aunt Marge. Okay? How do we know? Because she's a drunken sot. She's sitting there throwing back glasses of champagne and talking how? Exactly like Marge. So she talks a bunch, and we're told when Doge explains, Muriel, a chill that had nothing to do with the iced champagne, was stealing through Harry's chest. Earlier, book 5, I think it is, when Harry first sees Ron and Hermione, we're told he has this flame kind of burst in his chest. He's just filled with the warm fuzzies. And then they start explaining they've been together all summer. And they start talking about Dumbledore. And that burst of warm flame is killed. It's cold. We're told he gets this cold feeling. Same thing here. Why? Because cold is opposite of heat. And ardor refers to both heat and love. That's why you'll often hear the phrase ardent tea, ardent love, hot love. Not romantic, right, necessarily. So notice, they've been talking about Dumbledore, and what does Muriel's talk do? Doge is building up Harry's thoughts of Dumbledore. It's restoring this. Muriel comes in and she pulls ice water on it. Does she do it with fact? No. It's all supposition. Okay? So Harry overhears all this conversation. Overhears because, he's right there. It's not like he's eavesdropping. This isn't one of those eavesdropping cases. Okay? Page 157. Doge and Muriel go back and forth, and we're told Muriel swigged yet more champagne. Third sentence in that paragraph. Harry did not know what to think, what to believe. He wanted the truth. There we go. He wanted the truth, and yet all Doge did was sit there and bleat feebly that Ariana had been ill. Harry could hardly believe that Dumbledore would not have intervened if such cruelty was happening inside his own house. And then what really causes Harry's crisis of faith? What does he find out? End of the chapter. Where did the Dumbledores live? Godric's Hollow. And Harry's thinking, seriously? He could have lived down the street from me. He could have walked by my parents' graves. He never once said a word. What does that do? The fact that Dumbledore never once said a word feeds what in Harry's brain? Doubt. Okay? So, Kingsley sends his Patronus, the Ministry falls, Scrimgeour's dead. Harry, Ron, and Hermione escape, skipping a bunch. They make their way to number 12 Grimmauld Place. They're nearly caught. Okay. Harry has a vision where he sees Malfoy forced to use Crucio on Raoul, and he feels pity for him. And we get to chapter 10, Creature's Tale. A lot to cover. And Harry wonders, third paragraph. The accusations he had heard from Muriel at the wedding seemed to have nested in his brain like diseased things, infecting his memories of the wizard he had idolized. Notice, they're up here. They're not in here. Why? Because if they nest up here, then everything they do trickles down. Okay? It can't trickle up from the heart. What else? Harry's thinking, Godric's Hollow. Why hadn't Dumbledore told him? Why hadn't he explained? Had Dumbledore actually cared about Harry at all? Or had Harry been nothing more than a tool to be polished and honed, but never trusted, never confided in? The answer, yes. Harry is ultimately, as much as people don't want to admit it, nothing more than a tool. Or as Snape will put it later, Harry's what? Like a pig being fattened up for the slaughter. Okay? So, Harry finds the piece of letter, the fragment of a letter from his mother to Sirius that talks about James getting frustrated. It's after Harry's first birthday. Okay? Harry was born July 31st, 1980. So this is after July 31st, 1981. But it's obviously before October 31st, 1981. Well, let me rephrase it. It's before November 1st, 1981, because they died on October 31st, 1981. So it's sometime within that 3-month period, okay? And what do we find out? Dumbledore's got James's invisibility cloak. Wormtail had been by the week before, seemed a little out of sorts. And Harry's thinking, the only important thing about this letter is what it says about Dumbledore. Is that true? Probably not. Okay? So he tells Ron and Hermione what he heard about Dumbledore from Aunt Muriel. Okay, 30 pages in. So around 183, 184, maybe 185. Harry says, I'm not upset. I just want to know whether it's true or not. Hermione, you really think you're going to get the truth from old women like Muriel or Rita Skeeter? How much does Harry know about the truth from Rita Skeeter? When has Rita Skeeter ever written anything true? One time. When Harry dictated, word for word, what it was she was going to write for the Quibbler. Everything else was full of lies. Okay? Harry, she goes on, how can you, notice, believe them? In other words, Harry, you're... Do you believe him or do you believe them? Notice, neither of these is fact. Neither of these is like 1 plus 1 equals 2. Okay? What's Harry's problem? He's having to interpret. See, normally in the past, when he interpreted what somebody said, specifically Dumbledore, Dumbledore would tell him whether or not he was right. When Harry first interprets the prophecy, Dumbledore has to correct his interpretation because Harry thinks the prophecy means fate, No, it's not fate. You knew Dumbledore. What's Hermione appealing to? One of those ways that I talked about a week or so ago of epistemology. How do you know what you know? One of the ways we know what we know is what? Our experience. What has happened to us. For example, I know now not to just kind of reach blindly onto my workbench looking for something because I have very sharp chisels out because I sliced my finger over the weekend. Hadn't touched this chisel in months. I sharpened it and left it there. Okay? Experience tells me don't do that again. Experience tells me don't catch on fire because when I was 6 years old, I got 3rd-degree burns on my leg. It's not fun. It hurts. Okay? Stay away from that. Harry's had experiences with Dumbledore. I thought I did. You know how much truth there was in everything Rita wrote about you. Dozier's right. How can you let these people tarnish your memories of Dumbledore? Tarnish. What does that imply about his memories? We generally only use tarnish to describe 2 things. Silver and gold. Silver, if it's left unpolished, will get this dingy stuff on it. Gold gold doesn't literally tarnish. It'll just get dusty and such. How can you let those memories get tarnished? He looked away, trying not to betray the resentment he felt. Notice, he's feeling resentment at Hermione here. There it was again. Choose what to believe. He wanted the truth. Why? He doesn't want to have to choose. He wants it to be simple fact. How many of you have ever, I don't have time for this. How many of you have ever read a short story by Flannery O'Connor called A Good Man is Hard to Find? I highly, highly recommend it. It's not very long, 7 or 8 pages. In fact, there's a audio version on YouTube of Flannery O'Connor reading the short story. Long story short, there's a character in it named the Misfit. He's a serial killer. Okay? And you get to the end of the story, and we find out one of the reasons he does what he does is because he wasn't alive when Jesus was alive. And he says, and if I had been, then I'd have known whether it was true or not. Did he really raise people from the dead? But it's not fair because I wasn't there. So he's, I just go around because he's trying to find the proof of it all. Read the story. That's 4 short versions. Why was everybody so determined he should not get it? What's the it? The truth. Okay? So, they find R.A.B.'s bedroom, and Harry, puts Regulus Arcturus Black together with R.A.B., and they look for the locket. They can't summon the locket, and so Ron's like, well, how are we supposed to find it then? If we can't go Oxio locket. Hermione says, we search manually. Why? Stupid little short passage. Why spend any time on it? What is Ron not used to? Work. Hard work. Physical work. He's used to being able to magic things. Because at home, he can use magic. You can't use magic out in public, okay? And what else? His mom does all the cleaning. His mom does all the dishes. His mom does all the cooking. His mom does everything for him. Even though Ron isn't rich, he is in that sense spoiled, okay? We're going to see a scene later on where Harry says, no, we're going to do it right. No magic. Okay? In fact, one of the reasons Ron's going to leave them is because they can't magic food out of nowhere. So, Creature's tale. We find out Creature was particularly taken by Regulus, or particularly loyal to Regulus. Regulus gave him a task to do, go off with the Dark Lord, and Regulus told him, come back when you're done. Dark Lord commanded him to stay, but Regulus, Creature came back. Why? Because Ron says elf magic isn't like wizard's magic. I mean, they can apparate house elves in and out of Hogwarts, right? But wizards can't. And Hermione explains, that would fit. Voldemort wouldn't pay any attention to house elf magic because of what? They didn't count, in his opinion. They were lesser beings, just like Umbridge thinks. Okay? But Creature, notice, was loyal to Regulus, and he obeyed him. So, Harry says to Creature, somewhere around 195, probably 196 maybe. This is just a couple of pages before the end of the chapter. Harry's like, I don't understand you, Creature. Voldemort tried to kill you. Regulus died to bring Voldemort down, but you were still happy to betray Sirius. You were happy to go to Narcissa and Bellatrix. And Hermione's like, Harry, that's not how Creature thinks. He's a slave. House elves are used to bad, even brutal treatment. What Voldemort did to Creature wasn't that far out of the common way. What do wizard wars mean to an elf like Creature? How should Harry know this already? What's his first experience of Dobby? In his bedroom, right? Dobby starts to say something slightly bad about his owners. And what does he do? He goes to bang his head against the window. He talks about slamming his ears in the oven door. Okay? Regulus was trying to protect them all, Hermione says. Sirius, Harry starts to say, and Hermione says, Sirius was horrible to Creature, Harry, and it's no good looking like that. You know it's true. And Dumbledore said the same thing. I've said it all along. Wizards would pay for how they treat house elves. Well, Voldemort did. Pause. Dramatic effect. Build the tension. And so did Sirius. In other words, Hermione draws the conclusion that Dumbledore doesn't. Sirius died. Why? Not because of Harry. Not because of Dumbledore. Sirius died because of how he treated Creature all those years. And Harry said, Creature, please sit up. Notice how he starts to treat him like he did Dobby. And then he gives him the locket. And Creature goes, crazy. Okay? So, keep going. The bride. Lupin shows up, and he tells them what's going on. He talks about the Muggle-born Registration Commission. We're going to find out True Bloods, Talks about blood status. Ron says people won't let this happen when they read from the Daily Prophet. Lupin, it is happening, Ron. Muggle-borns are being rounded up as we speak. Why does Ron say people won't let this happen? Remember the phrase I put up several times? All that is necessary for evil to thrive is for good men to do nothing. Ron thinks, well, people will stop this from happening. Lupin says, no, good men are doing nothing. Why? They're afraid for their lives. Why did so many Germans in the period leading up to the Second World War not do anything? They knew about the concentration camps. They knew what was happening to Jews and homosexuals and Christians and gypsies. Okay, it wasn't only Jews. Okay? It was all the undesirables. Why did they do nothing? Because to speak up was to put the bullseye on yourself. Okay? So, Lupin says, I can help you guys. Let me go with you. This is 2, 7, 8, 9. Somewhere around 2:10 to 11. We find out Tonks is pregnant. And Harry's like, wait. Let me make sure I understand this. You want to leave Tonks at her parents' house and come away with us. She'll be safe there. I'm sure James would have wanted me to come with you. Harry, I'm not. I'm pretty sure my father would have wanted to know why you weren't sticking with your own kid, actually. Notice, Lupin's face drains of color. The temperature in the room drops a few degrees, metaphorically. You don't understand. Explain. I made a grave mistake in marrying Tonks. I did it against my better judgment. I've regretted it very much ever since. What is he implying? I went out of this vow that's bonded for life. Harry, oh, okay, so I get it. So you're just going to dump her and the kid and run off with us. You're going to be like Snape's dad. You're going to be like Voldemort's. He doesn't use these words, but it's implication. You're going to be like Voldemort's dad. Lupin springs to his feet. Don't you understand what I've done to my wife, my unborn child, blah, 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 blah. My kind don't usually breed. It will be like me. I'm convinced. How can I forgive myself when I knowingly risk passing on my own condition to an innocent child? Okay, let's say we accept everything Lupin says there. What does running off with Harry, Ron, and Hermione do for any of that? Nothing. So what's he trying to do? run away from his problems? Did James run away from his problems? No. Did Sirius run away from his problems? No. Harry, I'd be pretty ashamed of him. If the new regime thinks Muggleborns are bad, what will they do to a half-werewolf whose father's in the Order? He's thinking of Lupin's son when he's born, or child when he's born, Lupin. Harry goes on, my father died trying to protect my mother and me, and you reckon he'd tell you to abandon your kid to go on an adventure? How dare you? I think you're feeling a bit of a daredevil. You fancy stepping into Sirius's shoes. Hermione, no, Harry, like, too far. You just crossed the line. Harry, I've never, and notice, Harry, he wants to make sure. He wants to make sure Lupin gets the idea. I'd never have believed this. The man who taught me to fight Dementors. A coward. It's the second time he's used the word coward. Who else did he call coward? Snape. And Lupin draws his wand, blasts Harry. Lupin leaves. Ron's like, way too far. Harry, he had it coming. Notice what we're told Harry thinks. Sirius falling through the veil. Dumbledore suspended, broken in midair. A flash of green light, his mother's voice, begging for mercy. Parents shouldn't leave their kids unless they've got to. What's he mean by got to? Unless they die. That's the only way. And I can't help but read that. That's J.K. Rowling coming to some kind of closure with her mother's death. Because she tells us in interviews, she struggled with it. She really struggled with it for years. It's why she introduces Dementors in chocolate. Dementors were the physical manifestation of her depression. And chocolate, we know, does release dopamine in the mind. It makes you feel good. Okay? Hermione says, Harry, and he's like, shut up. If it makes him go back to Tom's, it'll be worth it. Little bit of foreshadowing there, by the way. Okay? So, magic is might. We're going to skip most of this. They go off to the Ministry of Magic. They've taken Polyjuice Potion, Mafalda Hopkirk, and I can't remember who the Red Scatter, whatever. Scattermore, and I can't remember the third person. And what do they see when they go into the atrium? Is it the wizard with his wand held up and the witch looking longingly and lovingly at him? In the centaur, and the goblin and the house elf? No. What do we have now? Magic is might. We have the thrones with the witch and wizard enthroned on them. And what are the thrones made of? Naked, writhing muggles. With the words, magic is might, inscribed on them. Okay? So, what do they get from the ministry? Why do they go, first of all? What do they figure out from when Creature comes back? Umbridge has the locket. How'd she get it? Louder? Mundungus, who stole it from the house. Okay? So they get the locket. They find out, Arthur Weasley's a blood traitor because they read the thing. What else do they get? They get Moody's eye, which was where? In Umbridge's door, so she can see what's going on. Okay? Chapter 14, the thief. Okay? And about We see Grindelwald steal something. Okay. We also have Harry coming to grips, so to speak, with the locket when it's around his chest. So we didn't get as far as we needed to. On Monday when we come back, we will pick up with Goblin's Revenge. We'll have to go a lot faster.